Church for allowing us to use their space. I feel like always have to recognize the people who do good things for you. Edgewood Church is an amazing partner to the farm, and they are an open and welcoming community to all people. Definitely a more community-based feel than some other institutions. So we were really appreciative of them helping us with the weather. I actually was coming inside because of the heat, not because of the rain, but glad to be here anyway. So my name is Katie Kissel. I'm the co-chair of the board of directors of Unearthing Farm and Market. I also happen to live right here next to the farm. So my husband and I and our 2 children, we've lived here for 13 years now, and the farm is only about 4 years old. So was here since the beginning and got to see the transformation of this space. So kind of how today is gonna go is we're gonna introduce our amazing panelists, and I'm actually gonna let them say a little bit about themselves. Hopefully they say enough that I don't have to come in and tell you how wonderful they are. On top of that, so guys, let them know what you do. But we're here to talk about soil contamination in the lead contamination in the soil, vice versa there. And talk about what that means both for the farm, as we have recently discovered that we have lead contamination in our soil, and for others who may also be experiencing that same thing. So one of our panelists is currently not here. She may be coming a little bit later. Her name is Annie Moore. She is an activist and community advocate who has done this work on the west side of Atlanta. And in fact, Ari was quite instrumental in getting that work done as well. So I'm going to start, if we can actually start on the other end, I'll let Ari introduce herself. Ari is from Emory University and was so crucial in helping us discover the issue at hand here. So Ari, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Katie. Hi, everybody. My name is Saikawa. I'm a professor in the Department of Environmental Sciences and undergraduate Department of Environmental Health at Emory. So my work used to be really on air quality, and we've been really looking into emissions coming from different things like garbage burning, the things that people don't usually think about. But in 2016, I had a first PhD student, and we were interested in looking at agricultural emissions. And that was kind of coinciding with the Atlanta movement happening in Atlanta. And we found out that there was no testing of soil before you grow food. So we thought that it might be a good idea to make sure that every lot that was going to be having the farm was going to be tested. And in that process, we found high lead level in one of the lots that was going to be leased for growing food. And so then that kind of changed our lab's focus from emissions and air quality to also including soil. And we were very fortunate to be involved with Historic Westside Gardens. At that time, Gil Frank was the executive director, and now it's Rosario Hernandez. So they were really instrumental in trying to figure out if there might be some other lots in that Westside area that they were working on that had lead. And so we collected a lot of soil with them, and then found a lot of lead contamination. So some of you might know that English Avenue, Vine City area now is a Superfund site, and is now listed as a national priorities list by the Environmental Protection Agency. So that includes 2,087 lots. But then we were also finding, I should also mention, the reason why was with working with the Historic Westside Gardens, we found that that was because of slag, waste material coming from smelting. So that looks like rocks. And we are finding that slag in a lot of different places, and that's why I'm talking a lot with these folks here, they will be telling you about what's going on in Atlanta and Georgia. So I really hope that everybody that is working with the soil, the lead contamination is not just from water. You know, we know about Flint, but it's not also just about paint. We also find a lot of lead paint in Atlanta homes, but it's also in soil, and that's really detrimental for it. So that's what I do, and I'm sorry I talked too long.
No, thank you very much, Eric.
I'm Henry Candela. I'm one of the managers at the Georgia Environmental Protection Division, and I've actually been working with Gary lately. She's basically been forwarding us residential yards that are outside the west side lead area, and so Beta and I kind of work on those cleanups. The farm just happens to be one of them. So yeah.
How long
I'm doing my
have
best
you
with
been?
public speaking. I'm not
I
the best.
know, it's okay. How long have you been with EPD?
5 years.
Okay.
My name is Bailey Williams. I'm a geologist at the Georgia Environmental Protection Division, and the project manager for this specific project that we're doing at Unearthing. So so far we've been like having back and forth talks with Katie and our contractors. And so I guess we're just here to talk about the process that we've gone through to get to this point and like our steps moving forward. So
Thank you guys. Yeah, so just to kind of back up and tell you folks that maybe haven't read every social media post that we put out there, kind of how this came about was originally before the farm started, there was initial soil testing that was done on the property, that, you know, whether it was due to it not following, you know, proper methods, whether they didn't go deep enough, whether there's a variety of reasons, but for whatever reason, a soil testing by a reputable environmental testing company came back and showed that the property was not contaminated, and that it was okay to grow. Yes, Liz, go ahead.
Do you remember the original test numbers?
I want to say off the top of my head, it was 47 parts per million on that. Those are for lead, and I mean they tested for a whole host of other things. And so, you know, using that as kind of our, you know, you just don't know what you don't know. And again, as Gary had mentioned, there is a lot of people growing in lead contaminated property throughout the city of Atlanta. And it's not really been something that we've looked for, right? In terms of understanding what makes good growing soil, and anyone who's been on our Unearthing Farm will tell you that the stuff is growing very well here. So, you know, you had no indicator that there was anything wrong. So we did have a steward who recognized one of these rocks, you know, and we had them all over the place. We had them lining all of our flower beds. And he's like, and they said, this looks like slag. And I was like, okay, I don't know what that is, but sure. And that is when they suggested that we bring the soil shop on site. We said, let's open this up to the community. They'll bring their soil samples. We'll get our soil samples. It'll be great. I mean, I guess it was great in one way, but the soil samples did come back as high. But it was a rainy day, it wasn't ideal testing conditions, and it was a shorter version using the XRF machine. And so we said, okay, well now let's go and make sure that this is legit. We had Emory come back on site. We did a much more in-depth testing model, which then showed the levels to be much, much higher than they were even shown when we did the XRF. So to give you an example and in full transparency here, currently what is deemed as, what would you call that? Normal limits or something like growing limits would be safe, right? Is the 200 ppm, give or take. So 200 parts per million. The original XRF came back with levels that were between 400 and 600 parts per million. When we did the in-depth testing, our highest decision unit came back at over 1,500 parts per million. Okay. So we had a moment, and we cried, and we felt our feelings, and luckily we had Ari, who immediately connect us with these folks at the Georgia Environmental Protection Division. We immediately got them on site to do a walkthrough, and we've started that process. But the good news is that there has been several key people who have spent the most time on the farm, who have had some blood testing, who have eaten a lot of food on the farm, who've had blood testing, and my children as well. That was the first thing I did because my small children play on this farm on a daily basis. And none of that came back outside of normal limits. So we're very grateful for that. But the goal moving forward is for us to make sure that we're keeping everybody safe. We also don't want to unnecessarily not serve the community, which is what we are here to do, but we want to do that only as far as it is keeping everybody safe. And so, yeah, we've had lots of questions for these folks, and they're not able to answer all of them because this is something that I think, and I think that's the important thing here. So I want to encourage you all to, we'll take some questions at the end. I have some more, you know, kind of, we'll call it softball questions to start out, and maybe we can all get some information out of the way. But yeah, I want to encourage you guys to ask whatever it is, and they will try to answer the best that their knowledge will allow. I also just want to mention that a special thank you, Henry and Bailey are here as to share their knowledge with us. Nothing they say here today is representative of the Georgia Environmental Protection Division, and we will not hold them to that in any way, shape, or form. So we appreciate their presence. Same with Ari. We're here as a community just trying to learn, okay? So go ahead and feel free to ask your questions here, and we'll try and, if we don't have an answer, maybe we'll try and get one from someone else, okay? All right, so my first question is, Ari, what is it from your perspective? Can you tell me a little bit about your understanding of, you know, lead contamination in the soil and how that translates to people having some like negative health effects? In other words, what are the ways that you're aware of that people can get lead poisoning from lead contaminated soil?
Yeah, thank you. So I think that's great that nobody had the high blood lead levels. And I think that has been the case for us as well. I don't think we have not seen any kids that were exposed to lead through the soil to have high blood lead levels, other than maybe 1 or 2 in the west side. And so if you are playing a lot, there are some kids that have pika behavior, meaning that you'll be eating soil. And some kids eat 10 grams of soil a day. And so if that soil is really contaminated, you could be really exposed. But that is very different from drinking water. So that's probably also why we don't see a lot of kids that have high blood lead levels. So that's a great thing. But then if you are exposed to lead, that is really bad for your brain development if you're a kid. That's going to be really crucial for your IQ. And up to about 2 years old is when your brain is really developing, so that we say that there's no safe level of lead for kids. So you don't want to be exposed at all. So I don't want you to think that if you are not getting high blood level, that's safe. That's not the case. There is no safe blood level. So the lower that you can keep, it's just better.
What about the impact on adults?
So impact on adults, I think that is not as important. So I think that's when, like, if you're exposed to lead a lot, like you can be exposed through occupational reasons. And if you are exposed over like 30 or 40 micrograms per deciliter level, you really have to go to a doctor and then get chelated. You can have impacts, obviously, but I think what we really care about at the levels that we're seeing in the soil is really what the kids.
And this one, Henry, maybe I'll let you fight over, who gets to answer this question. Is when we're talking about remediation for the soil, obviously, you know, we are concerned about the immediate impacts, especially for people digging in the ground and dealing with the lead day in, day out. But beyond that, what are some concerns? Like, why should we remediate a soil versus just like, okay, let's put up some caution tape for now and just like not go over there? Like, what is it about kind of getting it off of the land that makes it so important?
Yeah, definitely. So when you have like lead impacted soil, there's a lot of rainfall. All of that lead can eventually hit the groundwater, and then there's a lot of, actually there's not really anybody that land on rural water, but in rural Georgia, they'll drink that groundwater, and so that's what we need to get rid of.
And
Sorry.
Liz, no, you're okay. Just let me repeat the question. So if you guys, like, if they ask a question, let me repeat it, so everybody can hear it, and then we can go from there. No, I love this. Go ahead, Liz.
So when you talk about remediation, and most of the time it's like removal, what happens to the soil after you remove it?
Okay, so the question is, what happens to the soil after you remove it in the remediation process?
Let's go landfill, an appropriate.
So there's nothing to be done to it.
So it depends on like the contaminants. So if you have chlorinated solvents, sometimes they can treat it, but with lead, not really. There might be like some ways, because I've heard at gun ranges, they sometimes have like a metal, kind of like a metal detector, you would say, or like a metal attractor, and it tracks all of the lead off the soil, and then they can treat the soil that way. But for here, it would just go to the landfill.
We get a lot of our compost from the landfill. Will this problem become another problem if we do it again?
No, because they should be sampling, like, they should be, if they're following rules and regulations, they should be sampling.
So let me pause for a minute. So a couple of questions went back and forth.
Sorry.
So first of all, what we're saying is that lead, once it's removed, it goes to a landfill. Now, depending, Henry, correct me, there is different landfills that it may go to depending on the levels, correct? Can you kind of explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so if you have hazardous waste, if it's above a certain level, it needs to go to a hazardous waste landfill. If it's under a certain level and it passes like testing requirements, then it can go to any landfill.
Okay, so that's number one, right? I think that a lot of us may have feelings about that and the idea of like taking our problem and putting it somewhere else, yeah? But what I will say is that when we have these places that are designated as landfills, it's much less likely than if we leave something in a place that is surrounded by homes and communities, and you know, maybe right now we know that there's lead here, right? But in the next 100 years, in the next 200 years, what does that look like? It's more likely that those landfills will be able to be kept track of versus all the different spaces where it could be. So that's been one conversation that Emory and Bailey and I have had about that. So the second thing that Liz brought to attention here was that we get our compost from the landfill. Yes and no. So we have gotten, at least on this farm, just to clarify, because that was one of the things that we did, we're like, where is this lead coming from? We still don't know that, by the way. That is something that we're working to hopefully try and figure out. We have some theories. But we get we have gotten compost here from the DeKalb County, which is specifically made from yard waste only. So their compost is from that. The other compost that we've gotten has been through Compost Now and through their third-party site, which is not coming directly from a landfill. So, and we were able to track down that they do heavy metal testing on their compost, okay? So that was one thing that we were able to track down. And then, Brad?
Yeah.
Brad in the back, yes, tell me.
The more basic question is the high level of lead throughout the entire site, or is it localized to one place on the site?
Yeah, I'll let Bailey answer that one.
So, what Dr. Saikawa did was they broke their sampling into what we call decision units, and it's literally like rectangles of area out there, and they took 30 aliquots of soil from each decision unit. And so each decision unit was tested individually, and all of them were, I think, at least all of 1,200 parts per million, I think.
There was, I think, one or two that were below that, but yeah,
Okay.
most of them were.
In the thousands range,
Yes.
I'm pretty sure all of them were. So, yes, all of the decision units were high. But those decision units did not encompass the entire parcel of land out there.
So just to explain to you which decision units we were able to take, if you are familiar with the site itself, we did the north field as a single decision unit, the middle field as a single decision unit, and the south field. So those are all of our major production areas. We did our animal paddock, about half of it actually, as a decision unit, our herb berm as a decision unit, and our outdoor classroom area, okay? So if you kind of were to look at like a map of Unearthing Farm, it's basically like across, straight across. So none of the four corners, and not any of the edges were tested. So, I mean, we're not sure, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, that our contractor will be testing basically the whole site, is that correct?
Yeah, so I think we've pretty much discussed that, like, because the levels are so high on the site, we want to get all of the area tested. So we'll be testing outside of the decision units that are currently there, kind of like making our own decision units, so that will, again, encompass the whole parcel.
Yes, Joey.
I was just wondering, like, the depth of the test, because one theory might be, like, after a few years of growing, you've disturbed more of the soil, and so now, like, deeper sections might have been exposed.
Yeah. So that is definitely one of the theories we're going off. So again, the question is, how deep did we test for the testing we've done now? So I will move that to Ari for that question. And then, could it be that the initial testing was, correct, they just didn't go deep enough, and that over the past 4 years, as we have, disturbed the soil, that could be the reason that we are now seeing such high levels, that it was always there, we just brought it to the surface, so.
Yeah, so when we did the testing, it was only the surface soil, so it's just the top soil that we tested. So it's very possible that it's very different if you go deep. I think there was also a hand up earlier on this side.
Oh, I was wondering how long was a golden blood for this?
In the blood? Yeah, so for the blood, it's the acute exposure, so it's just for a month.
Yeah, so essentially that if you were exposed to lead and then, you were not exposed then or did not have any, lead exposure for a month and then went and got your blood tested, you would not necessarily show that past exposure. And Jeanette?
Would there be symptoms?
Yeah, so a question is, and now just as a, to protect our panelists here, none of them are health experts. We were not able to get a health expert. That was something that we did want for this panel. That did not happen today. But yes, I think Ari can kind of speak to this a little bit. What are some symptoms in adults, per se, of lead contamination or lead poisoning?
Yeah, so I think the biggest reason why it's very difficult to detect is because the lead exposure can lead to different symptoms like headache, dizziness, something that we don't necessarily think is because of the lead exposure, right? So it's very difficult, like you can have a stomach problem and that can also be, so there's no, so one thing is I told you about the IQ. So if the kids are exposed, then that can really block the signaling in the brain, and so that's why the neurodevelopmental issue is a very big deal in kids. But for adults, it can be really many different symptoms that you cannot just name very easily.
I was gonna say, I think one of the things that I've heard from more severe lead poisoning cases is where people actually have like mental health crises kind of as a result of severe lead poisoning. Yes, Sam, and then Liz.
Just a rough estimate of the main growing areas we have for annual crops, let's just say ballpark 5,000 square feet. What would y'all estimate to be, again, another ballpark of what that remediation would cost for that area? And if I can, like, 2 questions. Would this also, would you recommend removing canopy, like removing trees in order to get the soil to move from the other areas of the farm as well?
Let me repeat that real quick. Okay, so kind of a 2-part question is one is just the cost of remediation for the main growing area. I think I'll add on to that is like whether or not you see that is the main growing area the only point of concern? So maybe that would be I would add on to that. And then the second question is about canopy removal. Would there be canopy removal as a result of the remediation?
So as far as the budget, it's kind of hard because what happens is we sample the surface, then we go down 6 inches and do the XRF and see if it's still impacted. If it is, then we go deeper, So until we reach 2 feet, we won't go deeper than 2 feet. And so like, it's hard to say we have to dig to 2 feet all around. It's a big difference between just a foot. So it's hard to say how much it costs. In terms of the trees, we don't cut down the big trees. Again, we don't know exactly where we're gonna dig, but if it's pretty big, we can, maybe like little ones we can cut down, but if it requires permits, we would do more. We're not gonna mess with it.
And maybe a follow-up question to that is, what costs would Unearthing Farm, incur for like a remediation project like this?
If you guys were to do it,
Well-
I mean, it depends on how big the area is.
In other words, what is there funding available to cover certain projects? Because like on the west side, for example, the people with the different, with the homes, right,
Yeah.
they're not covering theirs. And I believe we're kind of in a similar boat, right?
Yeah, so state funding is not as big as federal funding, so that's kind of like, we're taking it on a case-by-case basis. Typically houses, it just doesn't cost that much, but when you get to something like this, and then, you know, maybe some other places are impacted, so. But in terms of the sampling, that is already allocated.
Liz, go ahead.
So, you talked about being the project manager for this, Bailey. What's the plan right now? Let's say after testing, if this next, decision testing, if we have to remediate, what's the plan?
So we're asking about what is the next steps for Unearthing Farm, and of course, this is still a developing thing, but I'm sure Bailey can share like what we have up until this point.
I mean, so again, this is all kind of hypothetical still at this point, but, once the sampling plan, is, put into plan, whatever, and we get the results back, then that will determine our excavation size, at least surface level. And this is like conversations back and forth with our contractors, telling them, like exactly where they're gonna dig. We go through a whole, process where they give us a RAW, which is called, it's RAW, which is a, response action work plan. And that like goes back and forth, edits between us and the contractor, making sure that they're doing exactly what we want them to do, and like, again, taking into consideration, like the people of the community. And then, once we get that finalized, then they will begin, hopefully excavating, where it's necessary, and that, you know, entails like a dig, pretty much, and just excavating soil, and then, if and when that happens, then they give us a response action.
RAR, which is a removal action report.
Removal action report, and then that details every single thing that happened, how deep they went, where exactly they dug, where they took all of the soil, like analysis results from those soil, like all the testing we've done, all the testing that they'll do after to confirm, how deep they went into soil. And so I think, yeah, like that's been our process, in the previous houses, or we've completed one, project outside of the West Side lead project thus far. It was a house, in Summer Hill, and so we fully completed that remediation excavation project. And so, again, this is just kind of a much bigger scale than that. That property was less than half an acre, and so to go from that, and the house took up most of that half acre, so, I think right now it's just like dealing with the scale of this project that we are kind of just in the works, about, and discussing like how big can this project be that we can take it on.
So I had a question, about how you guys, protect, the area and protect the community while the remediation process is happening. We kind of talked about that. Can you detail, like, what are some of the things that you put in place to make sure that while this soil is being dug up, obviously inhalation is a potential, way that people can get lead poisoning. How do you protect the community from those types of, poisoning issues?
Yeah, we have air monitoring whenever they're doing the dig. They put 3 stations out in the work area, upwind and downwind. So if they get any hits in the air monitor, then they'll know that, there's more than likely lead in the air, they need to stop work. And then they also do like dust suppression methods. I don't think we did it at the last stage, it was kind of small, but basically we just get the soil wet.
Yeah.
And then also like, if necessary, like silt fencing can be placed around the dig site to prevent like erosion and sedimentation control methods. I think in one of our other projects, they mentioned sock filters.
Yeah.
Sock filters, which again will like catch the runoff around a dig site. And then I think that's about it. Yeah.
What's the rest of the creek?
So what is the risk to, obviously, we're around Sugar Creek. We were talking about, there was some discussions, I think, with City of Atlanta that are still ongoing around that. What risks are there for this type of project?
For the creek, I mean, to be honest, we haven't gotten that far yet. We know we're gonna have to look at it, but we haven't gotten that far. And we do have to go through permitting with the City of Atlanta, so hopefully they can give us some insight. But yeah, we have not gotten through that.
Yes, friend, we have a new questioner here. I'm sorry, what was your name?
Violet.
Violet, thank you.
I guess I have two kind of unrelated questions. One of them was, what is the level that you would take the soil to a hazardous waste facility versus, I guess, it sounds like a normal landfill was the other option. And then my other question is there, y'all might not know this, but is there actively ongoing testing for contaminants in the creeks in Atlanta? Like, is there lead testing of the creeks already happening?
Okay. So 2 questions here is kind of what is the divider, the contamination level of which it goes to a hazardous waste site versus a regular landfill. And the other is if they're aware of any lead testing of the creeks that are going on in Atlanta currently.
I'll do my best to explain the has and non-has. So basically what happens is they take a composite sample of the dirt and then they run what we call a T-clip, which is it's a lab method that they use to basically characterize how likely it is the contaminant to leach into the groundwater. And so basically if it passes a certain threshold, which I think is 5 micrograms per liter, don't quote me on that maybe, of leaching, basically you have to take it to a hazardous waste landfill. And not a normal one, because obviously if you take it to a normal one, then it'll leach into the groundwater and impact the groundwater around it.
The acronym is TCLP for the T-clip sample, if you wanna dig deeper into that.
That's actually really interesting. If you're into lab methods, it's really interesting how they do that. Because we give them a solid and they give us back micrograms per liter unit, so I can't tell you the science behind it.
And then the second question was around if any of you are aware of any active lead testing for creeks in the Atlanta area.
I am not aware of lead testing. I know they do E. coli testing along the Chattahoochee, but I don't think they do lead.
Gary, not aware, really?
I mean, at USGS, they sample creeks around
Yep.
Atlanta.
Yep. USGS, you
Yeah,
said?
the United States Geologic Survey, that's feds. I am not sure that they would test for lead though, it's more like turbidity and, whatever else they test in rivers and creeks. Yeah.
Follow-up question to that, Ari, because I know the soil lab, you're able to test, obviously, soil, for lead, but, are you able to test water or no?
No, we cannot test water, so we can only, so in my lab, we do air and soil, we would love to do water. So WAWA, West Savannah Watershed Alliance, they did some lead testing in their creeks in the past. And what we did was we would go and check the soil around the creek and then look for slag around the river.
All right, Sam?
If hypothetically removing soil from the whole site isn't economically feasible, how feel about phytoremediation or using plants? Because instinctively, I'm thinking, from what I know about phytoremediation, using plants, usually perennials, to like bind or control somehow hazardous elements. Would that exacerbate groundwater infiltration?
So the question is around phytoremediation, the use of plants to, basically work on the bioavailability possibly of lead. And is that a feasible option?
I have not heard of, what did you say, phytoremediation?
Yeah.
I haven't heard of it, but like, the main thing about it is then, let's say you do that, you have to keep on sampling, like, every year, every 6 months to make sure that it did take care of the lead. If you excavate it, it's gone. But I don't know the entire process, so I wish I could answer that a little better.
Yeah, we have go ahead,
Yeah.
Ari, we'll have Ari do this, and then I see a bunch of hands up, so.
So we actually did the phytoremediation in the west side because of the same reason. And so the soil that we did the phytoremediation for was about, I don't remember off the top of my head. We have a paper on it, so I can send it to you. So the paper, so we did 2 different ones. One, we actually collected the contaminated soil and brought it to the lab and grew 4 different plants. So sunflowers, and then Chinese cabbage, and then another kind of flower, sorry, I'm forgetting, and then cowpeas.
Cool.
So that was 550 ppm of lead. In the end, the biggest take up was from cowpeas and Chinese cabbage, about 50 ppm.
Wow.
After 1 growing season.
Just one growing season?
Just 1 growing season. That's not a lot though, right? I mean, you have to continue doing.
It reduced it by 50
It
or?
reduced by 50.
So you need to do it 10 times.
If it's linear,
Yeah.
right? And also, the bad thing was, it actually went to the edible farms.
It did, the lead, you were able to test vegetables?
Yeah, so we also tested how much it went to the cowpeas themselves. So then, it was very ironic, so if you were to eat them, you would be really exposed.
Wow.
So it was over the FDA limit if you were to just eat the cowpeas. So I think what we realized was that it's really difficult. If you wanted, it's a great method, but you would have to do it for years, and then we also don't know.
Well, and then also, I assume if we're talking about the remediation and then the plants actually absorbing the plants themselves, if they were then turned under.
That's right.
It puts it right back where we started,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So now we're just, instead of removing soil, we're just having to remove plants. I don't know that you're necessarily, I don't know. It's a question for that. There were like a lot of hands raised from people who have not raised their hand. I saw one in the far back right corner, buzz cut friend, hello.
I had a question, and I got here a little bit late, so it's already talked about it. Is there any speculation as to like the source of contamination with the proximity to Pullman yards or anything like that?
I like this question, so we're gonna take it and see, I'm gonna see if any of my panelists have answers, and then I will give my speculation. I like a good theory. So does anyone have any speculation based on, y'all have walked through, you've seen the farm, you've seen the evidence of what the source is, and I think maybe my secondary question to that is, for Emory and Bailey, more so, is finding the source potentially important to the remediation project? Because obviously, my thoughts are, if we're not aware of the source, how do we not know that we're not potentially recontaminating the soil? So I'll start that with you, and then Ari, if you have any thoughts, go ahead.
Yeah, so you mean finding the source? Or what was it?
Yeah, finding the source of the contamination on Unearthing Farm.
And preventing recontamination after exposure.
Yeah. In terms of finding the source, I mean, I don't know how much that would help. What I think the source may be is just it's the long industrial use of Atlanta. I actually did take some time on Friday to look through old aerials to see if that was a junker at some point, which it could very well have been. I mean, Atlanta has been developed since what, I don't know, 1890s maybe. They probably had farmland out here. So at some point that could have been a junkyard. Or like some sort of parking facility where they dump stuff. That's typically what we find with sites in rural Georgia, is that someone's been dumping stuff out there. It was a junkyard. They were changing oil. In terms of lead, lead and gasoline back then. So that's what I think my speculation would be. And then there's also the slag that's on the west side. You said you found some here.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know how that got here.
Yeah, I guess we're there.
Yeah, and then, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I guess, I don't know, Gary's probably more familiar with this, but like at West Side Lead, all of the slag, it's like filter. So that was all in place around these industrial sites way back in the day. They removed that soil and put it in other places around Atlanta. Like that is the reason that West Side Lead is such a big area. And so that could have happened here. That is like a very possible explanation that that could have been filtered out there from a previous like industrial site. So that's like that's what I think it is.
So you asked explicitly about the Pullman yards. So the Science Gallery Atlanta used to be a Pullman yards, so we actually did test around there. It's very interesting, it was very low.
Okay.
So, and yeah, so I don't know if site itself, it seems it's pretty not contaminated at all. I don't know if that, when they were cleaning it up, did it come somewhere? But for slag, they were definitely used as a fill, just like Bailey was saying. So you dig 10 feet in the west side, you still find slag. And so that was a very common practice in the 50s, 60s when there was no regulation as well. So it is very hard to see sometimes where the source might be.
We'll start here and then go to Joey. Yes.
Many questions that are coming to mind, but the Fido thing that Chris mentioned, I made assumptions about that, but now I have more questions. Is there a way to make, for example, chlorine gas is like bad, but chlorine with sodium is just salt, that's fine. Is there a way for lead to be like that?
So is there a method of remediation where you can mix lead with something else that could potentially make it not bioavailable or not harmful?
So the bioavailability for lead is actually pretty low. So that's really helpful for the soil. So even though the soil has a lot of lead, you wouldn't actually make it to your blood. And that's probably why we don't see a lot of them in the blood lead levels. What's happening in the phytoremediation, most of the plants actually take it up in the roots. And so then that's helpful for doing other things. But then just like we talked about, unless you dig out the roots, you're not going to get rid of the actual problem. Some of the plants, like kale, really take up a lot. They love lead. And so that is a big problem because you don't want to be eating kale. So you do have to know what plants to avoid and what does go up. So the sunflowers, we were worried about the seeds, for example. So there are a lot of things that we could do because different plants are so different, and we haven't done all the experiments yet to understand what would be, where would they really go, but cowpeas, if they did go to the edible parts.
And this lead stays as elemental lead?
So we don't do the different, we cannot, in the XRF, we cannot analyze what kind of ion levels they might have, for example. Like you have to use the ICP-MS to do that, and we don't have the equipment for it. So, for example, chromium 6 and chromium 3, they are different impact on health, but we cannot look at them. We can only analyze the total level. Yeah.
What was the other acronym you said?
ICP-MS. What was the?
Oh, and I think, one of the things that we had talked about, because when we were talking about different, remediation tactics, and you think about, for example, Atlantic Station, right? So, that's when you would talk about like encapsulation as a remediation tactic, correct? Correct me if I'm wrong there, Henry. So essentially, you know, how we're going to make it to where it's not hurting anybody is by actually like mixing it in or capping it with concrete, correct?
Yes, you can do that. So if you run, let's say like a TICO example of the lead that's out there, and you can prove that it's not leaching into the groundwater, you can, or you just take a groundwater sample, install some wells, and there's no lead in groundwater. You can kind of leave it in place, cap it. We actually did something at another site called soil blending, in which we kind of blended the soil, which I can't tell you the exact mix, but it's like a concrete cement mix. And I mean, I'm not a fan of it. I'd rather just get it out and put clean soil in, but sometimes the areas are so large, and it's already you know, it's not a property that people are gonna be redeveloping or using. So it just kind of, we just end up doing it that way to save costs. But yes, there is capping options sometimes.
And the other, there was some other options. I don't know that Georgia, EPD does these, but, in terms of kind of chemical, remediation, but in like further investigating of those, while that would be, again, like adding something to the soil. Number one, that would be for lower lead levels than what we're discussing. And number two, that would not, the soil would not be good for growing afterwards anyway. So we have done like some different research on different options. We're always open to what is going to be best for the environment overall, as an organization, but we have to also be realistic about like what is available to us. So. There are other questions. Yes, Michael, and then is that Sarah? Did you have your hand up? Okay, so Michael, then Sarah.
Yeah, I just wanted to like throw something in the mix because there's a question about lead getting into water and the testing of water. And so I just wanted to mention that there's a program called Adopt a Stream, which is.
And what was the program called again, Michael?
Adopt a Stream.
Adopt a Stream, yes, okay, yes.
And so that is not direct testing of lead, but it is, I mean, I was just doing a testing this morning down on the South River, down the stream with here, and it involves chemical testing, and so that's more generic, and so that includes things like salinity and conductivity, and so a thing like conductivity is one of those things that if heavy metals like lead are getting into the water, you will see it, you know, you'll see the conductivity rise, and so I also want to mention that this part of the South River watershed is pretty neglected in the Adopt a Stream realm, and we're working with DeKalb County to try to get more Adopt a Stream testing sites going, but those testing sites are done by people like are in this room. You are people. You do Adopt a Stream testing. We want you to help us do more Adopt a Stream testing around this watershed. Please, let's talk about it.
And let's support Science for Georgia as a good point to shout out one of our partners for this evening. I appreciate that. So what Michael was talking about is the Adopt a Stream program, which anyone can get involved in. And one of the tests there, while it doesn't test for lead specifically, it does do conductivity. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Ooh, good. conductivity testing, which could be a sign for the existence of heavy metals, and that might be one way that we could test for that. So I think that's a really great point, Michael. Thank you so much. Sarah, yeah, go ahead. What was your question?
I was wondering, I know that you mentioned that there was more federal funding available, or like bigger federal funding compared to state funding for remediation. Was just wondering if you could elaborate on what that looks like a bit. And then I was also just curious if the funding for these types of projects overall has been affected by recent government cuts. Or I think Abigail, you also mentioned like your capacity to take on a project like this, and I was just wondering if anything is like uncertain because of that right now.
Ooh, that's a really
just how
good
hard it is.
question. I may have to turn off the, no. No. So the question is, A, the difference between state level funding with the Georgia Environmental Protection Division versus federal funding like through EPA. And then the follow-up to that, is there any cuts to this type of funding that has affected anybody up here? So we'll go ahead and, yeah.
So for, in terms of like federal versus state funding, I mean, you can look at it this way, like EPA deals with Superfund site, like what's out there. We deal with like the yards and, you know, we do have some big industrial sites, but I think our biggest one, we spend like maybe $1 million a year on, and that's just one site. While, you know, they already have, I don't know how much EPA has spent in, you know, the West Side Lab, but I'm sure it's millions and millions and millions. So we work for the state, so we haven't had any cuts. Our funding comes through what we call the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund, and it's basically made through state taxes. So whenever a manufacturer like 3M gets rid of hazardous waste, there's a tax on it, and that tax gets put into the trust fund, and that's where our salaries and the cleanup for these sites come from. So luckily, no cuts on our end. So.
Ari, do you have anything, have you experienced any, I don't know, I'm not saying that like leadingly, that you would want to share? You want to plead the fifth?
Do I want to share?
Yeah,
How much my funding has been cut? I think that's for another time.
Yeah, is the soil lab through federal funding?
Well, yeah, so we got 3 grants terminated, so the project that we were working on the west side has been cut, so that has been really hard. And all the EPA, I think the grants have been completely gone, and I think EPA research is gone, so that is quite disastrous for us, for sure.
What about, I mean, the second part of that question is like, what does that mean for us in terms of funding to get this project done here?
If it stays under the state level, it wouldn't matter. If we have to refer it to EPA, then it would matter.
What's the chance that we have to, like, what are the, no, what's the chance? I'm sorry.
I mean, I couldn't tell you. I mean, I really
It's not like, oh, it's just a bit over a foot, like.
Yeah, we don't have, that's the thing, we don't have thresholds. Like, I wish it was that easy. It's more like, okay, here's our funding for this year. Is this gonna be enough to put us, you know, are we okay for another year? You know, we use that money for a lot of things. Like, the trust fund goes towards our salaries, goes towards these cleanups. We also do, local government reimbursements, for if they need to do cleanups. And so it goes to a variety of things. We also deal with complaints as well. You know.
Stop complaining.
No, these are like, for example, Bailey's right now working on a trailer they found on the side of the road with probably 100 drums in them. And so like, how do you get rid of that? You know, that's our funding.
Like drums? Like drums?
I should explain, 55-gallon metal drums of hazardous waste.
Okay.
Not like that, I should explain.
I was like, well, you know, Facebook Marketplace is an option, I don't know. UAFLA.
I was wondering what's possible for remediation sites after they've been remediated, however long that might take.
So what's possible for remediation sites after they've been remediated in terms of, usage? Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on like what levels you're gonna remediate to, like, there's industrial, or we call commercial versus residential. You clean up the property to commercial level, you can't use it for residential. So it just depends on what your cleanup levels are, like your cleanup goals for the site is. So a lot of sites in Atlanta, typically they clean up for commercial, because you're only gonna use it for commercial.
What about us?
Yeah, so.
This is gonna be down with whatever EPA is doing, which is probably 200, I think is doing that. Down to 2 feet.
Which is residential.
Yeah, which is.
Yeah.
And specifically, one of the things that we discussed with our site walkthrough is we're looking for, because this is a special site where we do grow on site, so we are looking to replace the soil with quality agriculture level of soil is something that we're committed to doing our best. I think that's the goal, is to replace it with a equal quality to what they removed. Minus the lead, better quality, yes. Yes, Claire, and then Thomas.
Yeah, I'm wondering, after remediation, like, do you keep testing? Because I guess part of what's wrapped up in this question is there a possibility that this contamination is an ongoing thing and not just like a past event?
Okay, so the question is, do you continue testing after remediation has been completed?
I guess it would depend on like the site usage, like what's your future view of the site? Like if you're using it to farm, I would resample it, but if you're gonna turn that thing into like a parking lot, I would resample it again at some point.
Could you explain the difference, because I feel like.
Well, because
yeah.
like, a parking lot would have a concrete top on it, A farm, you're like farming and putting your hands in there.
So it's the opposite. I think you may have stated that opposite. You said if it was a farm, I wouldn't resample it. If I was a parking lot, I would. Yeah. So vice versa. We got you. No big deal. So
Bailey,
yes.
did you wanna say more about that?
I was just gonna say, so like, if it was an ongoing issue, as in like something is coming in to contaminate, currently, that, like, again, it like, just hypothetical, if it was a compost issue, then that, again, like, would kind of fall back on, like, y'all have to do your due diligence to verify that the sources of materials that you're bringing onto the farm are to the levels that you guys want them to be. So, it's not that, like, we are, like, hands-off once the project is done. It's just, like, what, actually needs to be done to protect human health in the environment. And, like, we're limited by, we can't verify what compost source you're using or whatever, again, you're bringing onto the property. So it's just like, we are like at the as needed basis kind of thing.
Yeah, and so question, and I'll let you guys decide who you think might have an answer to this. We talked about one potential theory is that at some point fill dirt was brought in on the property that included the slag material, which has then leached into the soil. So in theory, you come in and you take 2 feet of soil off the top. Is there, chance that, if that slag is still underneath there, that bleaching could move upwards, or does bleaching only happen in like a downward motion? Because I think that is, one of the concerns that we have had about, like, why is it that the initial soil sampling didn't show, and why does it show now? We know that there has been movement of the dirt, but it seems like at such high levels it should have shown. So, anyone have any thoughts on that?
I'll just speak on like what Westside Lead has done. So again, they only dig to 2 feet deep, and that's only if contamination goes down to 2 feet. So when they hit the 2 feet, they put like a liner on the soil that's exposed, and then that's when they're filling it with topsoil brought back in. And so I don't know where I was going with that, but
Well, so does that help prevent from upward
yeah.
leaching of the contaminated soil?
Yeah, I mean, like, again, the only way to kind of go back up is if you're like tilling and bringing bottom soil back up. And so at that point, it's kind of like, again, we're gonna tell you exactly what depths we're gonna dig to, and then it's kind of like, again, up to y'all to know where, like, the soil has been remediated and to what depths, and then no, like, don't dig past a certain point after that, because we can only guarantee that the soil is cleaned down to the levels that or the depth that we dug.
Thank you so much. Ari, did you have anything to add to that or no?
Yeah, so I think why, the testing didn't show, I think that's been, that's very unclear. I think the tilling is probably most likely, but also a lot of erosion might have happened too, and then that can result in getting the contaminated soil come up. So I think that's why they're putting this orange or whatever liner thing, so that that doesn't really happen easily. But that's not a permanent solution, right? So yeah, that's a problem.
What is a more
Is there a more permanent solution, where besides going and digging all the way?
Yeah, that would be, just keep on digging and digging and digging, but.
Just keep digging, just keep digging.
And then you gotta look at like the cost perspective of it, like at what point are you just digging to dig, or are you digging to protect human health? Like, who's gonna be going down there 10 feet unless it's like an excavation worker for 2 hours? And you just get to the risk level where you're wasting all these resources digging and disturbing the earth and just wasting resources for, not enough waste.
Thank you.
Speaking of wasting resources, I did a walk and talk to Sam as he was skirting out to get home to do some work before it got dark. And what he was getting after was, it'd be to keep the cost low and make sure that we got the farming area clear. And then after that was clear, and then on the perimeter, work use the cowpeas and different, or just local indigenous plants to help take out the lead on the outskirts and in the waterbed area, under the shade.
Is there value, or does EPD, when they take on projects like this, potentially look at remediation or removal of more high traffic or more concerning areas, and then leaving lead in other areas of a property? Is that something that you guys do?
I mean, if the cost is like too high, then yes, we'd probably look at, hey, what can we do to minimize exposure, but still make it safe for the people that work here and stuff. But typically our go-to is do it like how EPA has done it. But yeah, I mean, if costs are adding up, we like to get creative as well.
Yes, friend in the orange.
I'm kind of shaky on the terminology, but somebody that works in like agriculture told me that there's a method of kind of neutralizing the effects of lead in the soil without removing it through like I don't know if it's specific plants or like a specific chemical or something. Are you familiar with that, or is that something that?
We kind of talked about the different methods earlier regarding, can you plant certain things that draw the lead out of the soil? Can you add certain chemicals to the soil to make lead even less bioavailable than it already is? And while there are a lot of different methods that are discussed, there's still like problems with each of those methods. So yeah, we're still, I think everybody here is exploring all the options that are available, that are that have enough research behind them, to say like, yes, this is something that we can use. And then I believe we had another question over here, yes.
I was just gonna bring up like options like doing raised beds and things that can be done, maybe in addition to, you know, removing soil, but in order to like make sure long-term new issues weren't uncovered. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we had discussed this, so the question was about, you know, using raised beds, and we had kind of discussed, at our last walkthrough about that as an alternative, right? But maybe even in addition to, the remediation methods we're talking about. So can you, give any thoughts on like using raised beds, as a way to keep people safe, in terms of, the lead exposure?
Yeah, no, I know we talked about it. I guess how comfortable you guys are if you want to do the raised beds. Because if we do come in and do the remediation, technically the soil will clean.
Like instead of.
Oh, instead of, well, 1,500 is a high number. I would not recommend that. And also you gotta think about like 20 years from now, you know, like who's gonna own it? You don't wanna kick it down.
Yes, question here.
Do we know what industries make the most lead pollution?
So are there specific industries that we're aware of that make more lead pollution than others? Like which ones are kind of the biggest offenders?
I know that one of our sites is a lead site, batteries.
Really?
Yeah. X-side batteries, if you've heard of them. They sell them on Hogan. X-side?
Is
It's a
that a
brand.
brand?
Yeah, it's a brand.
Of like, not
Batteries.
laser or like?
No,
like
they're
car
car.
batteries? Okay, okay.
They recently went bankrupt for obvious reasons.
Love that.
Because they were spending all their money on lead remediation.
They did a lot of things.
Ari, are you familiar with other, if we were looking, you know, in general for sources of lead, what would you say were some of the biggest offenders?
I think in the past, lead paint and then the gasoline was very important. But in some countries, they still use the leaded gasoline, right? So if we can get rid of them, that would be good.
Yes, friend.
This is, I guess, more like an educational question, because I don't know much about remediation processes, specifically to those. So when this version of remediation that you're doing, where you're moving the contaminant, rather than like transforming it into the rock itself or breaking it down, when it goes to this other site, does it sound like it's like, if multiple sites keep doing, like the digging and the moving and the digging and moving wherever it's at, eventually you're just gonna keep cycling new dirt from somewhere else and putting it there, and then the contaminated soil is still gonna be there. So does that contaminated soil get like worked on in any way to like make it usable again, or is it just like an eternal cycling out contaminated soil from other places, and then all the soil is eventually just contaminated?
Yeah, let me, repeat that. Essentially, what is the deal with the contaminated soil and it being moved to another place? Are we just transferring our problems to a different location? You know, and of course, people in this area are very familiar with, what parts of Atlanta have landfills, right? It's the poorer, the blacker, the more marginalized communities is where those landfills tend to exist. So are we just taking soil from a gentrified neighborhood and putting it in a neighborhood that is, you know, not able to, you know, advocate for themselves? If I may, I'm sorry, I took a little liberties with your question.
You can answer that question too, but just more so like a long-term, like, I guess, and again, like, yeah, and like, I guess, just like a, moving from like, I guess, think of something
No, I'm just thinking of like, I think
It's a
that,
good question, it's a good question.
cause I don't know exactly what the landfill does with the soil. Like, I know there's various types of landfills, like, it's not just either household waste or hazardous waste, like, there's, construction and
In the
demolition.
hazardous waste site specifically, when they take that soil.
Oh, if it's hazardous waste?
Yeah, like if it's hazardous soil, like there's.
Yeah, it'll probably
regulations
stay in
and
that
stuff.
landfill, I don't think, cause when it's hazardous waste, I guess it's a landfill question, but if it's hazardous waste, they're not gonna put it back or treat it. I don't wanna speak for the landfill, cause I don't know.
Okay.
Cause sometimes they do treat like the chemicals and they turn them into something else, but in terms of what they do with like hazardous waste soil, I would assume they just leave it in there.
Is it gonna like disappear in 20 years, or is
Well-
there like a longevity on lead in the soil, like?
Well, as long as it's not leaching into the groundwater, cause you know, the landfills are lined and all that, I would assume it just stays there, kinda like, you know, what we do with the other waste that we have.
Point of interest, there is no lead in gasoline, that's added to gas. Lead isn't put in there to lubricate, so that the parts last longer.
Yeah.
That's wild.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, that was exactly what we thought about, not like before we bring it to the landfill. Is it possible that we have a more circular economy kind of a way to deal with it? And I think we talked about the phytoremediation. So in the ideal world, if we can phytoremediate and then use those plants for energy, like use it as an anaerobic digester or something like that, so that we can actually create food waste into energy together with those materials, I think that's a circular economy solution. But how long is it going to take for this soil to be actually useful, right? It's going to take a very long time.
That's a communal project, right? The whole point of it being like a community idea or thing is doing the thing that takes the longest amount of time so it's initially useful.
Right, so if that's something that you would like to try, even though that might not be possible in the end, right? Yeah, that's
These are really great questions. I do want to, we do have a hard stop for our panelists in about 7 minutes here. But so would love to get to some questions here at the end, but just wanted to give everyone a last chance. Yes.
Speaking of industries, you're still using lead with batteries, and fun fact, propeller planes still use lead.
Oh, propeller planes still use lead and gasoline?
Yeah, but the question, I'm wondering, are there lead mines in the world, and do we know where those are?
Are there lead mines? I don't know. Yeah, Harry, you wanna answer that?
I don't know where they are, but
Yeah.
that must be, that's probably because there was so much slag, right? People were looking for lead and then they were smelting to get lead out of it, and then there was the waste material. So, yeah, I'm sure there are still mines. I don't know where.
I was curious about them, if you have any, but.
There were 11 lead smelters in Atlanta in the past. So that's why potentially we have a lot of lead issues.
Okay, and so what was it, Violet, right? And then Liz, and then, did you have a question?
I was just wondering if y'all are gonna test, if there's, so you dig 2 feet down, and then is there any test of that lowest layer of 2 feet? Or is it just kind of like, we went down 2 feet, and that's all we got? You know, because now that you've opened up a hole, you could test another, even if you're not gonna dig it out. I'm curious where it's like.
So is there testing, any testing below 2 feet?
When we get to 2 feet, we do sample that last layer.
Great. Liz and then Joey?
Ari specifically, I was curious about, the plant's absorption of lead, and like our body's absorption of lead. I think you also mentioned like you wouldn't have it in your body after a month. Is lead poisoning for adults specifically? I know that like children is a lot more long term, but for adults specifically, if you get contaminated, are you gonna be okay in a month? And like if we eat like contaminated food, like, okay, that's a lot of questions, so basically just ask you, like, I would like to be able to farm and eat on this property, and what is the highest risk, and like, what does that mean, like, what is your recommendation? That you're allowed to say.
I was gonna say, so again, I will give Ari the out here that she is not a medical professional. But also, Ari, in terms of what you do know about lead poisoning and lead contamination, is the acute risk more of the concern, or is it the long-term kind of risk that is more of the concern?
Yeah, so I think the research is still going on, like what would it do to your health at the chronically low level exposure? So I mentioned that there is no safe level of lead. So there are people, including us, trying to figure out if you were exposed to chronically low level, would it impact your health, right? And I think our grant got terminated, and we don't have answers for that. And what is the ingestion rate was what we were really interested in, because people don't know, for example, like how much do we actually get from soil, right? So there's like so many different questions that we don't understand, and I think we do need more research, but we don't have the money. But I just wanted to make sure that, so whatever goes into your body would stay in the bone. So that's why the bone. So if you do,
So like the blood, which it would filter out, but the bone is like chronic.
that's right. So in the blood, it only lives for about a month, but then in the bone, it's still there. So that's why if you test for the bone lead, it's the cumulative level from since when you're born. That's a very different thing. Okay.
And so that was one of the reasons we were going to be doing the blood and the bone testing. Unfortunately, that was not able to happen today. So I'll go with Joey, and then we'll do last question. Okay, so Joey first.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's any other substances that were tested for that might be a common threat in agriculture.
I guess you can take that, because you guys had we have another above recommended levels. So Ari, go ahead.
Yeah, so in the lab, we have this equipment called XRF, X-ray fluorescence. And what we can do is we can test for 22 elements. And so what we did for these 60 U's, we tested for those elements, and arsenic was also high for this farm. But I do have to say, this XRF is different from the best equipment out there. So this is a 40,000 equipment. So out there is much more expensive equipment that can test for much more accurate levels. And we did test for lead, and the accuracy with the correlation with this very high level equipment is pretty good. So we are very confident, and that's what EPA uses to test for soil lead. For arsenic, I'm not as confident because we haven't done as much of testing, and we haven't had a lot of very high arsenic levels out there. So I hope that EPD can test for it if possible, but that is, arsenic is also naturally occurring. It's a little bit different in that sense too, but yeah, we did find high levels.
And then last question.
And then this is another, like, esoteric idealistic question. Based on like your individual connections to whatever entities you're attached to and what you do, you as like a person with the knowledge that you have available to you from whatever level you're doing, the question has the process, being able to use a tool of like being able to do some of the things that y'all are doing to test for stuff, like communally, without always having to involve some sort of state entity or federal entity, maybe pressure funds or whatever. Are there things that you can suggest to like a community or communities that we could do, like, or could do, like, on our own to like test things or begin a long-term remediative process regardless of what the soils that we use for, just so that it's remediated? Like, if there's suggestions that you all have or have heard of, or resources that I can go and read on my own and figure it out.
So what can we do as a community to improve our overall soil health, without, millions or thousands of dollars of funds, and to kind of combat some of these issues that have come up?
Sometimes we don't need funds, sometimes we just need, like, you were calling for hands. So sometimes we have hands and we have enough hands to.
I mean, I'm gonna speak about it just from like collegiate level. So like I went to UGA, and the ag, like School of Ag, is always publishing free literature about any type of variety of like agricultural knowledge. And I mean, every single college that has like an ag program usually has like free literature out there in any state. And so, I mean, I would say read about any problem that you think you may have, like in agriculture. Like there are so many free available resources online.
Some of those, like the public access.
Yeah. UGA, College of Ag and Environmental Sciences, that is, they're always publishing, again, literature about ag and, tech maybe as well. Yeah, Georgia Tech, Georgia State, I don't know if they have an ag program, but yeah, no, okay.
But all of that, that's all.
Yeah, literally go, UGA's website has so many free resources, and they can probably, there's probably a list of other things that, other resources they have on their website that can direct you elsewhere. And then like EPA website also, I mean, okay, well maybe not, yeah, sure, maybe not.
Archive, Internet Archive.
Sure, EPD has, literature available as well, the Environmental Protection Division, yeah, that's our, I'm trying to think. Yeah, like any other state
Should
government.
probably mention Emory.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yes, Emory as well, yeah, I'm so sorry. I went to UGA, so that's where like, I read a lot about what they've posted previously, and so, yeah, Emory as well, of course. Sorry, but yeah.
In terms of the community, I think what you started was really nice, the soil testing, encouraging people to test their soil. I think that's really good. It's helpful for the community, for the little kids.
Is there a structure to your, maybe you can share this maybe on an email to somebody that they can blast it out, but, and so you don't have to answer right now, actually, but like the structure of what you're doing when you created that, like maybe like some sort of visual, like the structure of how you created the system for getting together, so maybe like the community can do their own structure that's similar to that, and like connect together.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So we call it Community Science Soil Shop. And the reason why is because everybody can collect soil samples and then bring it. And while we are testing, we can talk about it. I think what's really important is that we don't really think about soil as the source of lead contamination. And so if you can spread the words out and then the more people take soil samples and learn about it, I think that's really important. Because for example, pets go out and bring soil back in, right? And if you don't clean the ponds, then that can be the source. And if you have babies, that can be pretty detrimental as well. And if you are working in these areas that have a lot of lead contamination, you want to change clothes, right? So I think that kind of conversation can happen in that kind of soil shop. And I think if you are able to talk to the friends, that's really better than us saying, oh, we should test for the soil.
I will just add one thing to that. I don't know if anyone else experienced this. I can't say that I was a very religious about taking my shoes off when coming into the house prior to this, and I am religious about it at this point. And I have a story that was shared with me by my child's pediatrician about the worst contamination that they had was in an infant in Grant Park. They were doing different land work in the front yard. the dog was coming in and out, bringing the soil in. That child had to be chelated, like it was the highest levels, like blood levels that they had ever seen. Strictly from the dog going out into the yard, bringing the soil, the baby crawling on the ground, eating the dirt, and that is what ended up causing the child to get sick. So, despite what I said earlier, one of our amazing board members and UGA faculty, Chris, has a question, so I will let her round us out here. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, thanks so much for taking the time. It's so important. And thank you also for great questions. Really great, wide-ranging questions. Ari in particular, and if anybody else has thoughts, I'm wondering, is there any way that how can we help with the research? I mean, it's kind of chilling to hear how nascent the research is. Yeah. That like, oh, okay, well, I mean, like lead has been, an acknowledged problem for quite a long time. So how can we help? Can we integrate some sort of community-based research component into the remediation process? Either with you, or is there something that you think that we could do on our own? Like what could we do, either with surveys or, I don't know, but, and if you don't have any ideas, right, I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts right now, but also let's keep thinking about this because I think it's such a great opportunity, and we really want the farm to be, to provide lessons for other small farms or other, kind of urban farms that will face the same problem. I mean, that's how we can, make lemons out of lemonade or whatever.
So how can we help the research area?
Well, I think it's a really good question, and then the thing that really bugs me is that the lead problem is something that's preventable, and so why don't we do something about it? If we could test every single kid when they are young, that is really simple, and still it's not done in almost all states. Only 10 states have it as a universal testing. I think that really has to change, and so if we can be more vocal about that, I think that's very important. But for your question, there is a brownfield educational grant that I found, so I think that would be really nice if we can make it work to showcase that, we find this lead contamination, but how can we turn it into something amazing? And I really want to thank Katie for her leadership, because this doesn't happen all the time. Whenever we find lead contamination, most of the times we are told that, we're not welcome. Like we find in Buckhead a lot of soil contamination, and then everybody just starts selling homes, right? So how can we change the system so that, there are problems in Atlanta, and how can we solve it in a way that's more helpful for the next generation to come? I think that's a really important.
Okay, let's do that.
I would just like to say from an advocacy point, okay, one of the many things that we have found out throughout this process is the requirement to report, or the requirement to make public, knowing about contamination, the threshold is very low. So for example, if someone had come on and wanted to buy this property, and prior to buying this property, they had tested the soil and they had found that there was contamination, they did not have any requirement, legally or otherwise, to report that they had found contaminated soil. Is the way that I have been, what it was explained to me, that there was some, or maybe it's not a requirement, or maybe it's just not something that people do. Because what we had found out, again, since then, was that there has been several potential sales of the property that had fallen through years ago. And so it makes you wonder, what is actually available. And so maybe we need to be advocating for this information to be made more publicly available. I know that once EPD knows about it, then, and if nothing is done, Henry shared with me that it would go on your like environmental hazardous sites, correct? They have a list that they're tracking, but, in terms of like requiring people to report these negative findings, I think is something that I would like to advocate for.
I don't know exactly if I misunderstood, but like, if a property owner found an issue, they have to.
It's not the property owner.
Yeah, if it's a potential buyer,
Yeah.
and they don't share it with the property owner, then you are correct, they don't have to report it to them.
Yeah.
Under our rules and regulations, it has to be the property owner. They can do it voluntarily.
Yes.
But they probably wouldn't, because it might ruin the sale or something like that, I don't know. But under our rules, yeah, you have to be the property owner.
Yeah, so, just interesting thing. Thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciate you all coming out. I was around for a little bit. I think some other folks will be around, to just catch up. And like, another big hand for our amazing panelists.